Christmas Eve, 2023, the night I thought would be quiet and warm. My little house in Charleston, South Carolina glowed with candlelight, the scent of roasted ham drifting through the dining room. The table was set in perfect symmetry. My late wife Eleanor had always cared about details like that, and for a moment, I allowed myself to believe this year's holiday might finally bring peace back into the family. I stood at the head of the table in my crisp white shirt, glass of Merlot in hand, ready to toast my daughter Lauren, her husband Tyler, and their two kids, Sophie and Ethan. The chandelier's golden glow caught the deep red in my glass. To family, I began, looking at the faces around me. To remembering those we've lost and cherishing. Lauren's bitter laugh cut through my words like a shard of glass. Cut the act, Dad. You've been playing the grieving widower for 5 years, and I'm sick of it. Before I could react, her arm swung, and the wine in her glass arced through the air in slow motion, catching the Christmas lights before it splashed across my face and collar. The cold liquid seeped into my shirt, dripping down my chin, staining the tablecloth Eleanor had embroidered herself. The silence afterward was suffocating. Sophie's eyes welled up and she ducked under the table. Little Ethan buried his face into Tyler's side. Across from me, the Bennett family, my longtime neighbors, froze mid-bite. Aunt Clara dropped her napkin and stared. I stood completely still, feeling the wine trickle down my neck. My mind, the mind that once designed entire bridges for the county, automatically began cataloging the moment, the exact trajectory of the spill, the temperature of the wine, the faint smell of oak from the barrel it came from. Lauren's voice rose again, sharper now. You sit here in this big old house, hoarding Mom's insurance money, while your grandkids get dollar store garbage for Christmas. I set my glass down and wiped my chin with a napkin. Those weren't garbage, Lauren. I chose each gift carefully. Carefully cheap. She spat. Her face twisted as years of resentment spilled out. Ethan wanted that electric train set, Sophie wanted a real dollhouse, and you give them plastic junk. Tyler placed a hand on her arm. Lauren, maybe this isn't the time. When is the time, Tyler? She snapped. When he's gone and it's too late. She reached for the box I'd wrapped for Ethan, a model rocket kit I'd spent days picking out, and tore it open. Pieces clattered onto the floor like scattered hope. I bent down slowly, picking them up one by one, keeping my face calm. When I straightened, I locked eyes with her. Thank you, Lauren, I said evenly, for finally showing me your true face. Her lips parted, and for a second I saw hesitation, but she recovered quickly, feeding off her own fury. My true face? What about yours? Sitting in your little fortress counting Mom's money while we struggle. You think you're the hero here? Aunt Clara appeared in the doorway, holding Sophie's coat. I'm taking the kids to my place for the night, she announced, her tone leaving no room for argument. Lauren's jaw dropped. You can't just take them. You've embarrassed yourself enough. Clara cut in, guiding Sophie and Ethan toward the door. Lauren slammed her empty glass down so hard the sound rang in my ears. Fine. Let Grandpa explain why Christmas is ruined. Christmas, I said quietly, was ruined the moment you chose cruelty over gratitude. Tyler was already tugging her toward the front door, murmuring something I couldn't hear. Lauren twisted in his grip, glaring back at me. You'll regret this. You'll die alone in this house, counting your precious money, and no one will care. The door slammed, rattling the windows. Tires squealed on the driveway. I was alone now, just me, the wreckage of the dinner table, and the wine stains spreading across Eleanor's good tablecloth like a map of betrayal. And as I stood there, I realized something. This was the first time in years I saw my daughter clearly. And it was also the moment I knew, really knew, that things would never go back to the way they were. The dining room looked like a battlefield. Torn wrapping paper on the floor, the rocket kit scattered in pieces by the hearth, red stains soaking through the tablecloth Eleanor had hand-stitched 40 years ago. I walked through the house slowly, methodically. This wasn't grief anymore, this was data collection. My hands still smelled faintly of wine as I pulled my phone from my pocket. I began photographing everything: the stains on my shirt, the ruined gifts, the half-empty glass Lauren had slammed onto the mantel. Each picture was time-stamped, each angle deliberate. In the corner of the living room, the Bennets whispered to one another as they slipped into their coats. Mrs. Bennet caught my eye on her way out. "I'm sorry, Henry," she murmured, using my name the way Eleanor used to. "We didn't know it would be like this." "It's not your fault," I said. But it was someone's fault, and I intended to prove exactly whose. By 9:15 p.m., I was in my study, the desk lamp casting a warm circle of light over my papers. I pulled open the small safe behind Eleanor's framed photograph and retrieved a folder marked Estate and Insurance. Inside were my will, the property deeds, bank statements, and Eleanor's life insurance payout records. Lauren's accusation that I had hoarded the money replayed in my mind. But as I scanned the records, the truth told a different story. Sophie's hospital bills paid in full when she was born, Ethan's daycare covered for 2 years, the $14,000 I'd transferred for Lauren and Tyler's roof repairs. All there, in black and white. My phone buzzed. A message from Lauren. "Dad, I'm sorry about tonight, but you really hurt me saying I'm not your daughter anymore. Can we talk tomorrow?" I stared at the screen. No apology for throwing wine in my face. No acknowledgement of the scene she'd made in front of neighbors and family. Just a calculated attempt to reel me back in. I screenshotted the message, filed it under evidence, manipulation, and kept going. Minutes later, another text from Tyler. "I should have handled it differently, but we're under a lot of financial stress. Please don't stay mad." Still nothing about the children crying. Nothing about the destroyed gifts. I opened my laptop and drafted an email to my attorney, Richard Morgan, a steady, no-nonsense man in downtown Charleston who'd helped me settle Eleanor's estate. "Richard, we need to meet as soon as possible after Christmas. The matter involves revising my will and ensuring legal protection for my assets. Urgent." When I hit send, I felt something shift inside me, not bitterness, but clarity. Eleanor had always believed in giving people second and third chances. I had followed that belief for years. Tonight proved it was a mistake. Upstairs, I changed into a clean shirt, folded the wine-stained one into a plastic evidence bag, and labeled it with the date and time. Back in my study, I pulled out a yellow legal pad and began making a list. Photograph and document all damage. Gather financial records showing past support to Lauren. Secure all bank accounts and remove her access. Schedule legal review of will. Establish trust fund for Sophie and Ethan, conditional on respect and good conduct. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 10, its deep chime echoing through the quiet house. I poured myself a small glass of water, sat back down, and reviewed my notes. This wasn't just about protecting my money. It was about sending a message that love wasn't a debit card and family wasn't a free ride. I was still looking over the insurance documents when my phone rang. It was Richard calling back despite the late hour. "Henry, I got your email. You sound different. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, looking at the evidence spread across my desk. "Better than fine. I'm ready to make some changes." 2 days after Christmas, Charleston was still dressed in holiday colors, but the air had a damp chill that made the old live oaks drip rainwater like they were weeping. I parked outside Morgan and Hayes Law, Richard's office, with my leather folder of evidence sitting on the passenger seat like a co-pilot. Inside, Richard greeted me with his usual measured smile. "Henry," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Come in. I've looked over the email you sent. Sounds serious." "It is," I replied, setting the folder on his mahogany desk. and I want it handled with precision. He opened the folder, studying the photographs, the stained shirt, the broken rocket kit, the text messages. You documented everything, he said, almost impressed. That's going to help us a great deal. But you understand, disinheriting a direct family member often triggers a legal fight. That's why you're here, I said. And that's why I brought in someone else. A knock at the office door made Richard glance up. My oldest friend, Frank Dalton, stepped in. We'd been friends since high school football. He was the steady quarterback. I was the guy who could fix anything with duct tape and a good plan. I'm here for moral support, Frank said, sliding into the chair beside me, and to take on whatever role Henry needs. Richard's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Executor? That's the idea, I said. Someone I trust completely. Someone who won't be manipulated. Frank gave a sharp nod. You know me, Henry. If she tries anything, she's running into a brick wall. Richard leaned back in his chair. All right. Here's what I recommend. First, we revise your will to remove Lauren entirely as a beneficiary. Second, we create a separate trust fund for Sophie and Ethan. They'll have access at age 25, but only if they meet certain conditions. What kind of conditions? I asked. Richard tapped his pen on his desk. Documented proof of continued education, no criminal record, and evidence of maintaining a respectful relationship with you or your estate executor. We can add community service requirements if you'd like. Frank grinned. Make it 30 hours a year. If they want Grandpa's money, they need to earn it by doing good. Richard smiled faintly. It's unconventional, but legally sound if written correctly. I reached into my folder and pulled out the current will. With a green marker, I crossed out Lauren's name wherever it appeared. Frank watched with quiet satisfaction. Feels good, doesn't it? He said. It feels necessary, I replied. I've spent years hoping she'd grow out of this entitlement. Now I see it for what it is, a pattern. I won't reward that. Richard made notes on his yellow legal pad. We'll also create a video testament. It will explain, in your own words, why these changes are being made. Courts find that especially compelling when someone tries to claim you weren't of sound mind. Let's make it as detailed as possible, I said. Dates, events, evidence. If she challenges it, I want the judge to see the whole picture. Frank leaned forward. You think she'll try? I gave a short laugh. She's counting on my money as part of her future. She won't just let it go, not without a fight. Richard stood, gathering the papers. Then we'll make sure that fight is one she can't win. Outside, the damp Charleston air smelled faintly of the sea. Frank and I walked to our cars, the pavement slick under our shoes. You really ready for this, Henry? He asked quietly. I've never been more ready, I said. This isn't just about me. It's about teaching her that actions have consequences, and about protecting the only part of my family that still matters. Frank clapped me on the shoulder. Then let's make sure she learns the lesson. I drove home through the wet streets, the oak trees arching overhead like guardians. In my mind, I could already see the final page of this story, not bitterness, but peace. But between now and then, there was a battle to fight. And I intended to win it. The morning after my meeting with Richard, I decided it was time to close every gap in my defenses. If Lauren had been bold enough to humiliate me in front of half the neighborhood, there was no telling what she'd done behind the scenes. I called Frank early. Meet me at Coastal Federal Bank in an hour, I said. I want a witness. He didn't ask why. That's one of the reasons I trust him. He knows when to keep his mouth shut. At the bank, we were greeted by Robert Green, a branch manager who'd handled my accounts for over a decade. His easy smile faded when I explained my concerns. Henry, I've actually been meaning to talk to you, he said, lowering his voice. There's something unusual in your file. He pulled up a document on his screen and rotated the monitor toward me. A home equity line of credit, $28,000, opened 2 years ago, secured by my property, with monthly payments automatically taken from my checking account. My stomach dropped. I never signed this. Robert reached for a magnifying glass, comparing the signature on the document to the one on my driver's license. See here? The H in your signature is completely different. This isn't your handwriting. Frank leaned in. She forged it. Robert's face was grave. Who else had access to your personal information? Lauren, I said flatly. Always Lauren. We requested a full review of every account. The deeper Robert dug, the worse it got. A forgotten joint savings account opened when Lauren was 18, 2 credit cards I never knew existed where I was listed as guarantor, and an investment account that had been quietly drained in small amounts over the last year. Grand total? I asked, though I already knew I'd hate the answer. Robert exhaled slowly. Roughly $46,000. All in unauthorized withdrawals, forged documents, or accounts opened without your knowledge. I sat back in the chair, my mind working like it used to when I'd troubleshoot engineering failures. Lauren's Christmas Eve outburst suddenly made perfect sense. She wasn't just angry about gifts. She was terrified. She knew I'd been funding her lifestyle without realizing it, and if I caught on, the well would run dry. Close every account she has access to, I said. Change all my passwords, security questions, and contact information. Add Frank here as the only alternate contact. Robert nodded. And Henry, you'll need to file a police report. This is felony-level fraud. Do it, I said. Frank glanced at me as we walked out of the bank into the cool coastal breeze. You're taking this better than I expected. I'm not taking it, I replied. I'm using it. She's just handed me the kind of evidence no judge can ignore. At home, I spread the bank statements across my desk like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. There was a pattern to her withdrawals, small enough to avoid triggering alerts, timed to coincide with legitimate expenses so they blended in. Clever. Almost clever enough to get away with it. I was deep in thought when my phone buzzed. It was Richard. Henry, I've been thinking, this financial fraud changes everything. It strengthens your case, not just for the will but for criminal charges. Can you meet me tomorrow? Of course, I said. Then, after a pause, Richard, I think it's time to start talking about what happens if she tries to get clever in court. We'll prepare for that too, he said. And Henry, don't underestimate her. People who feel cornered tend to get desperate. I hung up and looked around my study. Eleanor's photo still smiled at me from the shelf, a reminder of the kind of person I used to be, patient, forgiving. That man was gone. Now I was an old engineer with a plan, and my daughter had just made the mistake of her life. That night, after Frank left, I sat in my study flipping through the bank statements again. My mind kept circling one question: how had Lauren been so precise? She'd timed withdrawals and transfers almost to the day of my larger expenses. It was too exact to be guesswork. It hit me like a cold draft through an open window. She wasn't guessing. She was watching. I called Richard immediately. Do you still have the number for that cybersecurity specialist you mentioned once? Alex Hart, he said without hesitation. Best in the business. You want me to connect you? Please. The next morning, Alex arrived with a black laptop bag and the calm demeanor of someone who'd seen every flavor of digital mess. Mr. Walker, he greeted, shaking my hand. Richard filled me in. Let's start by mapping your network. He sat at my desk, typing with speed and precision, pulling up a diagram of every device connected to my Wi-Fi. Interesting, he murmured. There are 3 devices here that don't belong. I frowned. I live alone. That's what makes this concerning, Alex said. He traced the connection route on his screen. One of these is in your house right now. I felt a slow, heavy drop in my chest. Show me. Alex stood and walked straight to the guest room, the one Lauren used when she stayed over. On the desk sat an iPad I'd almost forgotten existed, buried under some old magazines. Alex powered it on. Your banking apps, email, insurance, even your calendar, all logged in. Whoever set this up could monitor everything you did online, in real time. I didn't have to guess who. He scrolled through activity logs. This goes back 2 years. She's been reading your emails, tracking your spending, even monitoring your doctor's appointments. 2 years, I whispered, running my hand over my face. That covered every suspicious withdrawal, every unexplained shift in her tone. Mr. Walker, there's more, Alex said quietly. He opened a messaging app on the iPad and pulled up a conversation thread labeled Tyler. I read the first message and felt my jaw tighten. Lauren, still waiting for the old man to kick the bucket. Tyler, he's tough. Can't be much longer though. Lauren, I'm tracking his spending. He's living like he'll be around forever. Tyler, at least we know exactly what we'll get. Lauren, unless he changes the will. That's why I need to stay in his good graces. Alex's voice was steady, but I caught the flicker of discomfort in his eyes. There are dozens more like that. Document everything, I said. Every message, every login, every file she touched. For the next 3 hours, Alex worked methodically, screenshotting conversations, saving network logs, and pulling timestamps. This isn't just financial fraud, he said when he finished. This is felony-level identity theft and criminal stalking. I sat back in my chair, staring at the evidence spread across my desk. 2 years she'd been inside my digital life, reading over my shoulder without me knowing. 2 years of smiling at Christmas and birthdays while secretly planning how to carve up my estate. Alex, I said finally, we're going to use this. But first, I want to make sure she can never do it again. He nodded. We'll lock it down, new router, 2-factor authentication, encryption, the works. And I'll monitor your network for the next 6 months. By the time he left, the house felt different. Not safe yet, but fortified. I stood at the window, looking out at the quiet Charleston street. Somewhere out there, my daughter thought she was still in control. She thought she could talk her way back into my good graces or keep spying to stay one step ahead. She had no idea I now held the kind of proof that would end every argument before it began, in court, if necessary. And I fully intended to use it. By the time Alex left, the rain had stopped, and Charleston's streets glistened under the lamplight. My home network was secure now, but that wasn't enough. I needed something permanent, a shield against whatever legal challenge Lauren might try. That night, I sat in my study with the curtains drawn. I positioned my laptop camera directly in front of my desk, the same desk Eleanor and I had bought 40 years ago when we moved into this house. I set out the photographs, bank statements, screenshots from the iPad, and even the plastic evidence bag holding my wine-stained shirt. When I hit record, I spoke slowly, deliberately, looking straight into the lens. If you are watching this, it means my daughter, Lauren Walker, has challenged my will after my death. Everything you see in front of you is evidence of why I have removed her from my estate. I held each piece up to the camera, the forged bank documents, the messages where she discussed waiting for me to kick the bucket, the records of unauthorized surveillance. I described the Christmas Eve incident in detail, how she'd humiliated me in front of family and neighbors, and how the years before that had been a steady pattern of manipulation and financial abuse. My decision is not emotional, I continued. It is based on documented actions over a period of years. My grandchildren, Sophie and Ethan, will have a trust that becomes available when they are 25, provided they show respect and live responsibly. But Lauren will receive nothing. This is my deliberate, final choice. When I stopped recording, I saved 3 copies, one in a secure cloud folder Alex had set up, one on an encrypted USB drive, and one sent directly to Richard. The next morning, I called Frank. "She's coming over," I said. "That's fast," he replied. "She thinks she can talk me into backing down," I said. "But this time, the conversation will be recorded." I placed a small audio recorder under the edge of the coffee table in the living room. Then I brewed coffee, as if it were just another day. At exactly 6 o'clock that evening, Lauren's SUV pulled into the driveway. She stepped out wearing a coat that probably cost more than my first car, her expression somewhere between regret and calculation. Tyler trailed behind her, looking like a man who'd been dragged into enemy territory. "Dad," she began the moment I opened the door, "I know Christmas got out of hand. But we're family. We should be able to work through this." I said nothing, just gestured for them to sit. She launched into her pitch, how she'd been stressed, how the kids missed me, how we could reset if I just let go of the bad feelings. It was a performance, every word polished to sound humble but leave the door open for her to regain control. "You know," she said, leaning forward, "when you're gone, the house should stay in the family. I mean, that's what Mom would have wanted, right?" Tyler cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. I let her talk. Every sentence, every half-smile, every carefully chosen word, all of it was being recorded. When she finally paused, I spoke. "Lauren, I've heard what you have to say. And I've made my decision. Nothing you've said tonight changes it." Her jaw tightened. "So that's it? You're cutting me out because of one bad night?" "This isn't about one night," I said. "It's about years of choices. Your choices." For a moment, I thought she might drop the mask entirely, but she forced a smile instead. "We'll see about that." When they left, I retrieved the recorder and listened to the entire conversation. She'd given me exactly what I wanted: proof of her intent to push for inheritance, proof of her awareness of my assets, and not a single word of genuine remorse. The trap was set. February arrived in Charleston with a crisp breeze off the harbor and a hint of salt in the air. My mornings had taken on a quiet rhythm: coffee, a walk along the marsh, and time in my study preparing for the upcoming court dates. That afternoon, as I was sorting through letters from people who'd attended my talks on elder abuse prevention, a sharp slam of car doors broke the peace. I walked to the front window and saw Lauren's SUV in my driveway. She climbed out with a tight jaw and wild eyes, pulling a large piece of poster board from the trunk. In thick red letters it read, "My father betrayed his family." She planted herself on the sidewalk in front of my house, holding the sign high. "People, look!" she shouted toward the neighboring houses. "This man cut his own grandchildren out of their inheritance. Henry Walker is a heartless father." Curtains twitched. Doors cracked open. Across the street, Mrs. Bennett stepped onto her porch, phone already recording. I pulled out my own phone and began filming from the safety of my front window. At the same time, I called the Charleston Police Department. "This is Henry Walker, 18 Bayview Lane," I said calmly. "My daughter is in violation of a restraining order. She's on my property right now." "Yes, Mr. Walker," the dispatcher replied. "Officers are en route. Please stay inside and keep recording." Lauren began pacing the sidewalk, holding the sign like a weapon. "He's sitting on $500,000, she yelled, "and he won't give a dime to his own grandkids. What kind of grandfather does that?" Mrs. Bennett's voice cut through the air. "We all saw the news about your fraud charges, Lauren." "Lies," Lauren snapped back. "He's manipulating everyone." Neighbors gathered. Some filming, some just watching. The Bennett's teenage son had already gone live on social media. Within minutes, 2 police cruisers rolled up, lights flashing but no sirens. Officer Martinez, a tall man with calm eyes, stepped out and addressed her. "Ma'am, you need to step away from this property immediately. You're in violation of a court order. This is my father, she said, her voice cracking. I have a right to see him. No, you don't, Martinez replied, his tone firm. Put the sign down and place your hands behind your back. This is insane, she shouted, looking past him at me through the window. Dad, stop this madness. I'm your daughter. I stepped out onto the porch, keeping the required distance. My voice was steady. My daughter died the night she threw wine in my face, Lauren. You're just someone who happens to share my DNA. Her face twisted into something between rage and desperation, but she didn't fight when the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Dad, she said, voice dropping to a plea, think about Sophie and Ethan. They love you. They'll have their education funds when they're 25, I said evenly. If they live with the respect and gratitude their mother never showed. The officers guided her to the cruiser. Neighbors slowly dispersed, some giving me nods of support. Mrs. Bennett crossed the street. You've done the right thing, Henry, she said softly. She's done nothing but hurt her own case. It's sad, I replied, watching the patrol car disappear. But some people never learn that actions have consequences. Back inside, I sat in my study and replayed the footage I'd taken, 47 minutes of her violating the restraining order, shouting accusations, and behaving exactly as I'd predicted. This wasn't just another piece of evidence. This was the final nail in the coffin. The courthouse in downtown Charleston was buzzing when Frank and I arrived. Local news vans were parked along the curb, their reporters adjusting microphones and glancing toward the entrance like they were waiting for a celebrity scandal to unfold. Richard met us on the front steps, 2 rolling suitcases at his side. Everything's here, he said, patting the cases. Photographs, bank records, digital forensics, witness statements. It's the kind of evidence package lawyers dream about. Inside, the polished wood and high ceilings smelled faintly of lemon oil and history. Lauren was already seated at the defense table with a court-appointed attorney who looked about 25 and deeply uncomfortable. She kept her eyes fixed on the table, refusing to look at me. When the judge, Margaret Hollis, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, entered, the room went silent. Richard opened the case with a steady, deliberate voice. Your Honor, this is not a case about family disagreements. This is a case of systematic elder abuse, emotional, financial, and digital, spanning multiple years. He began with the photographs from Christmas Eve, the wine-stained shirt, the shattered rocket kit, the ruined tablecloth. Then came the text messages, projected on a large courtroom screen. Still waiting for the old man to kick the bucket. At least we know exactly what we'll get when the time comes. A murmur rippled through the room. Next, Alex Hart testified by video link, explaining in plain terms how Lauren had used the forgotten iPad to monitor my emails, bank accounts, and medical records for over 2 years. She had a constant window into his private life, Alex said. This wasn't accidental, it was intentional, sustained, and highly invasive. Then Robert Green from the bank took the stand, presenting the forged loan documents and comparing the signatures. This is not Mr. Walker's handwriting, he said firmly. The bank's handwriting analysis confirms it. Lauren's lawyer tried to object, muttering about family tensions, but Judge Hollis held up a hand. Counselor, this is not tension. This is fraud. When it was Frank's turn, he spoke with the steady conviction of a man who'd stood beside me for 5 decades. I've seen Henry through the best and worst of times, he said. He's a man who plans carefully, acts deliberately, and doesn't make decisions out of spite. If he's cut someone out of his will, it's because that person earned it. Finally, Richard played my video will. On the big screen, there I was, sitting in my study, laying out every piece of evidence with calm precision. The room was so still you could hear the faint hum of the projector. My decision is not emotional, my recorded self said. It is the result of documented abuse, theft, and betrayal. My grandchildren will inherit if they live with integrity. Lauren will receive nothing. When the video ended, Lauren's attorney tried one last time. Your Honor, families fight. This is an extreme reaction to a few heated moments. Judge Hollis cut him off. A few heated moments? Your client committed fraud, invaded her father's privacy for years, and violated a restraining order in front of witnesses. This is not a misunderstanding. This is elder abuse, and the court will treat it as such. Her ruling was swift. Lauren's challenge to the will was dismissed with prejudice. My revised will was validated in full. Legal fees awarded to my side. The restraining order extended for 2 more years. And the criminal case for the fraud and violation was referred for further prosecution. When the gavel fell, I felt something I hadn't in over a year, the clean, sharp air of absolute vindication. Outside the courthouse, the reporters swarmed, but I kept my statement simple. Family is built on respect and love, not entitlement. My grandchildren will inherit when they're ready. Until then, I'm at peace. Frank put a hand on my shoulder as we walked to the car. It's over, Henry. I shook my head. No, Frank. It's just beginning. Now I get to live my life without looking over my shoulder. December of the following year felt different from the moment the lights went up in Charleston's old oak trees. The air still carried that crisp bite off the harbor, but my home was warm in a way it hadn't been for years, not just from the fireplace, but from the people who now filled it. Frank arrived first with Ruth, his new partner, carrying a pie that smelled like cinnamon and comfort. Alex Hart came next with his wife, Sarah, and their little boy, Tommy, the one I'd nicknamed my junior engineer, after he showed me a blueprint for a spaceship powered by cookies. Aunt May drove in from Savannah, and the Bennetts from across the street walked over carrying flowers and a basket of homemade bread. No one mentioned Lauren. Not once. That chapter was sealed. I set the dining table with Eleanor's best china, the same set that had been on the table the night Lauren lost her temper. But tonight there was no tension. Only the hum of friendly voices, the clink of glasses, and the smell of roasting turkey. Before we sat down, I handed each guest a manila envelope. Inside was a plain language summary of my final will. I wanted them to see it, to understand exactly why they were in it. Tommy tore his open first, grinning when Sarah read it aloud. When Tommy Hart turns 18, he will inherit Henry Walker's workshop tools and engineering books, provided he keeps asking questions and stays curious. The table chuckled, and Tommy puffed his chest like I just knighted him. Frank's envelope named him executor and left him the house, with the understanding he could live in it or sell it, so long as the proceeds went toward maintaining our little circle of chosen family. The Bennetts would receive Eleanor's beloved greenhouse and garden. Alex would inherit my technology assets and set up an educational fund for Tommy, and Aunt May would get the family heirlooms and photographs. Sarah's eyes misted over as she read hers. Henry, you didn't have to. Yes, I said, raising my glass. I did. Family is who shows up, not who shares your blood. And you all showed up when it mattered. We toasted, glasses clinking under the warm light of the chandelier. Tommy clinked his apple juice against mine with all the seriousness of a formal ceremony. Dinner was full of easy conversation, updates on Tommy's science fair project, Frank and Ruth's plans to visit the mountains, and May's new volunteer work at a literacy program. The Bennetts told a story about the time their cat climbed onto the roof and refused to come down until the fire department got involved. After dessert, while Sarah and Ruth boxed leftovers, Tommy tugged at my sleeve. Mr. Walker, can we build the cookie fuel rocket now? I laughed. Absolutely. But only if you drew up the new specs. He proudly handed me a crayon drawing, the Mark II model, with upgraded cookie capacity and extra sprinkles for power. We set up at my workbench in the garage, the rest of the party drifting in to watch. Standing there, with Tommy explaining how the sprinkles worked as boosters, I realized just how far I'd come in a year. Last Christmas had ended with wine dripping from my shirt and my faith in family shattered. This one ended with laughter echoing through the house, Eleanor's photograph watching over a table full of people who had chosen to be here. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I stepped outside into the cool December air. The stars hung bright above the harbor, and the distant sound of carolers carried faintly on the breeze. Inside, the grandfather clock chimed 9. I thought about all that had happened, the betrayal, the courtroom battles, the quiet victories. It had been a long, hard fight, but I'd protected what mattered. Real family had found me, not by accident, but by choice. And I intended to spend every Christmas from here on out surrounded by them, with no shadows lurking at the edges of the celebration. I smiled, closed the door against the winter air, and went back to my workshop, where a half-built cookie-powered rocket waited for its final touches. Because sometimes, the best way to end a dark chapter is to start building something new.